we don't bump too far over 10 o'clock, although really try not to do that. But thanks everyone for joining us. Most of you already know me. I'm Marie Principe, Program Officer with the Middle East and North Africa team at the Center for International Private Enterprise. Really glad that you could join us today from your home offices. So for today, it won't be news when I say that these last few months have been really difficult for a number of reasons for folks. I don't want to list the difficulties that the outbreak of COVID-19 has caused, because I'm sure we're all familiar with them. And this discussion isn't meant to be a downer. It's meant to focus more on the opportunities that difficult times pose, the hopeful side of things, and how people can find ways to turn adversity to their advantage, and particularly how entrepreneurs can turn adversity to their advantage. So to start things off, we're delighted to have Karen Kerrigan joining us. Karen has been called America's Entrepreneurial Envoy, and is president and CEO of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, which advocates for entrepreneurs and small business owners. Karen regularly testifies before the US Congress on key issues impacting entrepreneurs, investment, the economy, and has been appointed to numerous federal advisory boards, including the National Women's Business Council and the US-Iraq Business Dialogue. She also chairs the newly formed Small Business Roundtable, which is a coalition of leading small business and entrepreneurship organizations dedicated to advancing policy, securing access, and promoting inclusion to benefit the businesses at the heart of the American economy. As if that doesn't all keep her busy enough, Karen is also a board member and former chair of CIPE, so we're doubly glad to have her with us today. Karen, I'll turn it over to you and for you to share some of the insights that you've had on how COVID is affecting entrepreneurs and what you're seeing in terms of how they're able to find a silver lining to all this.
You bet. Thank you so much, Marie. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you today. I cherish my relationship with CIPE, and of course being on the board and working with entrepreneurs across the globe, as I've done over the past 20 years, and certainly here in the United States as the CEO of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. And we have 100,000 members and a couple hundred network partners here in the US. So certainly, we do have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the small business community. And, I have to say at the beginning of this year, our agenda and what we thought 2020 would bring, both as an organization in our agenda, but also our members, obviously is starkly different than what has ensued over the past couple of months. And it really, COVID-19 and of course the government's response, the shutdown orders, which essentially shut off foot traffic and a lot of economic activity to small businesses of all kinds and across all sectors, really has been quite devastating. And many went into 2020 thinking this is going to be their best year yet, making investments, hiring people, and then of course COVID-19 hit. So a very shocking development, and most of our members, they operate on very thin profit margins, and have a few weeks, maybe a month's cash flow. So the drop in revenues and demand, and of course the uncertainty of what was going to happen in terms of the reopening and how long the shutdown would be, really has had an impact. And so, the good news and the silver lining, Marie, if you want me to say one, is that, the focus here, at least, thank goodness, from a policy perspective in the US, and I know across the globe too, because I've been, sort of watching what's happening across the world, has been on small business in terms of what we can do to support entrepreneurs and small businesses. And the Small Business Roundtable, which I chair, we released a new survey with Facebook a few weeks ago, and it's not surprising in terms of what the big concerns are for small businesses. demand and access to capital. And I know that's the same for small businesses everywhere. But the good news is, as I've talked to many of our members and done a fair amount of local traveling, talking to business owners, is that many have found a way to pivot to this challenge and to navigate and survive. There is going to be failures out there and bankruptcies, but for the most part, we do see our members staying very optimistic. And the way that they've been able to do that, Marie, has been through the use of technology. Really embedding technology across their operations. In fact, the Facebook survey found that there's been a 50% increase, in terms of using that platform and other platforms in order to connect, to collaborate, and to stay, relevant to customers, and also to find new customers, because consumers are actually using Facebook and other platforms more as well. They're using a lot more social media. So they've been open to, they want to hear from their brands, but they're also open to hearing from other businesses and to try, new business offerings. And I think that's the opportunity and the good news for small business. We released a survey yesterday, Marie, on cloud services and, how important the use of the cloud platforms has been to small businesses. And, 82% of small businesses in the US said that the use of cloud services and the use of technology, whether it's, again, for communication, collaboration, marketing, outreach, e-commerce, doing accounting, making payroll, has been essential, to their business. So technology is a huge enabler in order to navigate the current crisis, and hopefully, and will be something, that business owners continue to use during the uncertain reopening period, and then, of course, during the recovery period, which will take some time. So we, and I encourage all you to visit our website, specouncil.org, sign up for our e-news. We're sharing success stories all the time, and they really do apply to businesses everywhere. So I'm looking forward to hearing, from our panelists today, who are consortium partners of the Livelihood Innovation through Food Entrepreneurship Project, the LIFE Project, which is a State Department funded project led by CIPE and supports and encourages entrepreneurship, job creation, cross-cultural engagement in the food sector. So this program is so important, particularly now. And I think it's fantastic that over 300 entrepreneurs, have graduated from this program. 69% women entrepreneurs, 50, I think over half, or just about half, Syrian refugees. And with the help of this project, entrepreneurs are learning how to reduce costs, drive revenues, navigate business regulations. These are important even in a good economy, but they're especially important right now. So, I really look forward to this discussion. I know June 20th is World Refugee Day, an important day to reflect and to focus on the refugee community and to think about the positivity and the untapped human capital, that is available through this community, and solutions in order to tap that human capital. So, also, I do have my my Cuisine of Life cookbook here, which I'm a cook, so I am definitely going to be diving into this very soon. It's available on Amazon, and I know you'll be talking about this and plugging it later. There's 50 recipes in here from the Life Project participants. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Marie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was great. Good. Happy to see the cookbook in someone else's home also being held up these days. And it confirms that Amazon is working for us, which we sometimes, we're a little nervous about since it's the first time for CIPE to work with Amazon. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Yeah, as you rightfully said, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, no matter the context. And for CIPE, where we work in emerging markets, there are all sorts of challenges in addition to the best of environments. There's conflict, political upheaval, things that make it really difficult to start a business, and even more difficult to do it in the formal sector. The Life Project, as you mentioned, works at the intersection of all of this, helping to create sustainable livelihoods for refugees in the host communities in Turkey. And our members have not been untouched by the impact of COVID either. So we are looking forward to a discussion to talk about not only entrepreneurship generally and how folks can thrive in difficult environments, but also how some of our members have been finding opportunities, and how the refugee community is responding to this. And also, I think the unique opportunity that the food industry poses, because that, as a necessary good, there are probably a lot of opportunities there. So thanks again, Karen, and hope you're able to continue and join us for the rest of this.
I will. Yes, absolutely.
Great. So with that, let's turn to sort of our panel discussion. The bios are in the Eventbrite link, so I'll just do a sort of a brief refresher. We have Dr. Eric Fretz joining us, who teaches at the University of Michigan within their #1 ranked entrepreneurship program. He owns and manages 2 small businesses and 2 charitable organizations, and is retired from 20 years of service in the Navy. He's also a faculty affiliate with the William Davidson Institute within the University of Michigan, and in that capacity has worked very closely with the Life Project, especially working with our teaching team on pedagogy and teaching adult learners and that sort of thing. We also have Cullen Gilchrist, who's CEO and founder of Union Kitchen, which is a DC-based food incubator and accelerator that has helped thousands of food businesses grow and expand. Cullen and his team have advised the Life Project from the beginning on kitchen configuration within our food enterprise centers, member management, and sustainability. Then we also have Güler Altansoy, is CEO and co-founder of IDEMA, which coordinates and implements programmatic responses to development and humanitarian challenges in Turkey. IDEMA is our lead implementer of the Life Project in Turkey, running the 2 food enterprise centers and managing the day-to-day operations of them. And then we also have Noor Akkad, who is the Life Project coordinator for CIPE, based in Mersin. Noor is originally from Aleppo, Syria, and studied economics at the University of Aleppo, has been living in Turkey for the past 7 years, and is very well acquainted with the food entrepreneurship ecosystem in Mersin, as well as connected to the Syrian community. And her brother-in-law owns a very successful chocolate factory in the city. So she's really right in the thick of it. And when we're being good to her, which is always, she gives us chocolate. So
that I definitely do. Yeah.
Thanks. So maybe we'll start off sort of big picture, thinking about entrepreneurship generally. Eric, I'll give you the floor first, and tell us a little bit about what you are seeing among your entrepreneurs that you're coaching, and what makes an entrepreneur most likely to be successful. If there's any, I know there's no perfect formula, but what kind of things help them navigate a crisis?
Sure. Well, I think in one sense, if you're good at the entrepreneur game, this just sort of takes it up a level, because of course there's always conflict, crisis, new things, opportunity, high risk, and this just sort of puts it through the roof. So I think if you were an entrepreneur that already had a reasonably high risk tolerance and an ability to kind of sort of say, oh, I'm going to see what the next thing is, how can I take advantage of this? You'll be successful. It doesn't make it easy. So the risk tolerance resilience is a big one. I really like the ones that really stay in their area of expertise. I have I have a couple that they either stayed in their area of expertise and found a new gap, or they had a different area of expertise they hadn't been using, and they saw a better opening here, and they just drop over and started to go forward in this new area. I had a friend who was doing a kind of essentially like a storage business, I guess you'd call it. And he had always had trouble finding places to put stuff and temporarily. And he realized that on campus in our town, all the students are gone. So he's basically putting the storage units, he just drops them in these open parking lots, pays like a small fee, and he just sort of got this new angle going, and that's going to work great for him, at least until the students come back. So that's the kind of an example of somebody seeing an opportunity, jumping into something new. And then I think the other ones that really you can't emphasize enough is this, the sort of the people piece of it. I think particularly as a psychologist, this is kind of my thing. When you have humans that are under this kind of stress and facing these kind of pressures in any kind of business team, if your leadership is shaky or flaky, this is the time when people will just collapse, or they'll run, or they'll give up. But if you have a dynamic leader with a little bit of panache, they'll stick with you. They'll stay with you through almost anything. I mean, if a human being can have purpose and see a vision of what can come next, they are tremendously resilient and survivable. But if you take away that hope, then you just get all sorts of undesirable side effects. And so at least particularly in my one business that was hit the hardest, I had to pull the employees aside, and I was very clear with them. This is exactly what I see. This is the commitment I'm making to you. Even if we can't do this, I will pay you myself so that you will not suffer for at least this long. And this was a very, very empowering thing. There's a lot of energy, and we've come through it. We're reopened now. And so, but I just felt that was super, super important, was to be like a visionary, like they know the leaders there and has their back. So I think those are all pieces that are really important for entrepreneurs to consider when you're under these kind of crazy conditions.
Mm-hmm. Eric, in terms of the folks who have found ways to be successful and the kinds of skills that they may be drawing on, what are those skills, and do you think that those kinds of things are they coachable, or are they things that folks might come in with? What kind of potential is there to help coach an entrepreneur likely to thrive in a challenging environment?
Okay, I lost a little bit of that, but I think I got it. So I think it's a bunch of what I've already covered. I don't think you obviously can't coach expertise. You bring that to the table based on what you've seen and the team that you assemble. So I guess one thing would be, that is coachable is like building a good team. So if you want to be in a business that requires A, B, and C for expertise, and you only have A, then you need to hire in B and C. Yeah, and then it just keeps coming back to me for that team skills, taking care of the emotional piece, being inspirational, really having everybody on jobs that they enjoy doing, right? So they're putting it basically in an area where they can really thrive. Is that close? Because I think I missed a little bit at the end of the question. So is that close to what we were talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I think if I cut out, it was also about whether these sort of skills are coachable or not, which you addressed. So thanks. I think, thinking about the way that the particular opportunities that might exist in the food business, I'm wondering, Colin, if you can speak a little bit about what you're seeing among all of your members who I'm sure are moving in a ton of directions right now, maybe less so now than they were a couple of months ago. But, we're seeing in DC that restaurants are starting to sell groceries, coffee shops are making hand sanitizer. What are you seeing in the food business industry, and how is Union Kitchen helping members navigate this?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Marie. And thanks to everyone else for joining today. What we've seen is, in kind of speaking to, again, Eric's comments there on the skills, is plans have gone out the window. Karen mentioned this. Whatever plans, whatever projections, whatever goals had to be changed, even if they were good, and even if they align with what we're looking at now, they had to be updated, they had to be changed. And what we've seen is a willingness and a resiliency to maintain businesses, to keep them in business, to maintain and grow the supply chain here locally. And to do so, businesses have had to adapt. Largely, they've adapted towards and away from catering, away from restaurants, away from coffee shops. You gave the example of coffee shops making sanitizer. We've been making sanitizer with Compass Coffee here in DC. They had 12 cafes open. They had to close half of them entirely, and the remaining ones are down 90%. And so for them to, not face their demise, they've had to pivot. And so they took their expertise in leading teams, they took their expertise in facing challenges, and they learned how to make sanitizer overnight. And then they learned how to make 1 million bottles of sanitizer, not overnight, but over a series of weeks and months. And that's helped them sustain their business. It's helped them, keep their core team around. and is preparing them for, whatever might come. I think we're at an interesting point where maybe in the beginning of this crisis, we were thinking about, well, how do we get through until the period where everything goes back to normal? And I think now we're starting to think maybe a little differently, that we don't really know where it's going back to. We don't really know what normal will be. But we do know that our ability collectively as entrepreneurs and small business owners to respond to the unknown rapidly and as it changes before us will be the legacy that these companies have, that will kind of carry them into these next phases of recovery, or I don't know what phase we're in DC right now, but it's probably not the right one. And how do they figure those things out? So we've seen a tremendous amount of move towards packaged products. So a lot of the work we have been doing has been around manufacturing packaged products for the last 5 years, because we've seen that as a place for businesses to build expertise, to build what we think is a strong foundation. And many of them have either shifted to it from, say, catering, and many have shifted entirely to it because they were, say, running a food truck and making a frozen product. So another example there is a Swizzler food truck, which if you're in DC, you might have had. They make hot dogs and burgers and French fries. They've launched a line of frozen products that we're selling in our stores, and we're working with other retailers to sell. So they've started with a series of French fries that you can pop in the oven. They have like truffle Parmesan sauce that goes on top. And as soon as we figure out how to taste these things over Zoom, that's one of the first things you should try. They've also been working on putting out their hot dogs and their burgers. And so just like figuring out how they can keep going forward, how they can figure out to pay their expenses, to pay their loans, to kind of pay these things that are not going to stop as we move forward. So that's a lot of what we've seen. Those are a few examples. I'm happy to kind of go into some more, Marie, or kind of take a different angle.
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind, there are the folks, particularly in the food industry I'm thinking of, but I'm sure this applies to other industries as well. There are people who are trying to figure out a way to stay, doing what they're doing and maybe doing it slightly differently, but they're still trying to push ahead and find openings. And then there are the folks that like Compass Coffee who say, you know what, we're gonna continue making some coffee, but we're also gonna make hand sanitizer. And I think that demonstrates an incredible responsiveness to market demands and a lot of agility there. In terms of making that call, are you seeing it being more based on what's going on with the supply chain? Is it just dependent on the leadership and what their decisions are? Does it depend on the product? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard decision to make. And we've seen businesses across the country and in other countries, and I'm sure it'll be interesting to hear from Nora and Gulaire. How do you make the call to transition? How do you make the call to change your business? How do you make the call to forsake things that you've worked on for so long? And that is a challenging thing. For the Compass Coffee guys, and they're a decent example here. They were Marine captains, and they're in Afghanistan, and they were doing a decent amount of work there around working to kind of rebuild an economy or late on in their time there. And there's obviously leadership skills being taught to not hold on to things, and as opportunities come, you must take them and build anew. And so what we've seen is leaders in our community making those choices, and then we have all been working to encourage others to make swift choices to prepare for the future. And that is a hard thing. I've had to sit with many folks and just be like, hey, listen, I know you love what you do. And you have to make a decision today to change that. And you have to make a decision tomorrow to activate that change. And that's the only thing that you have before you. The other choice is to confirm that you won't be in business in a few months. And so that's a very hard thing. It takes the leadership skills. I think it takes the elements that Eric was talking about, but I also think it takes the community. It takes a community of people that are making those same choices. And when others are making those same choices and you can follow their lead and their example, the hard choices are less hard. The hard choices are, they're, I guess you could say, normalized. And so one of the fun parts in our community, it'll be fun to kind of hear about in Turkey, is they've been making these choices together. And so many of them have made it to the point where I'd say just about everyone has made the hard choice to go in a different direction, to change their staffing, to change their capital structure, to find a way to build a business in an uncertain time.
I think that's great. I don't even need to, Guler, I was looking for a place to message you and say, go ahead and chime in, because I don't even need to set you up. So this is a perfect time to talk about, the community and in the Life Project. I think you're seeing a lot of the similar things.
Yeah, absolutely. During this crisis, actually, we have one really specific point, which is different than other crises. Like usually businesses, entrepreneurs, when they face a challenge with their business, they think like, it's my challenge and I have to overcome it alone. It's my business's problem. But during COVID times, we see that it's not individual. It's not one business's challenge. It's even not one country's challenge. It's globally, all the business community and all people are facing the same issues and challenges. This, in a way, gives entrepreneurs some support and power to think like, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in this spot, and we are together and we can solve that challenge together. And what we see with the Life community as well, like members or entrepreneurs, they come together, they negotiate, they discuss their issues, and actually they support each other. We have some examples, like one of our entrepreneur, he had a shop of künefe, which is a traditional delight, and he never had any social media or digital platforms. He was not active in digital platforms. Now he had to close his shop because all the shops were closed because due to COVID-19. And our other members and our trainers supported him to get active in social media and sell his products online. So that's one concrete example how communities support each other and bring solutions and also implement the solutions together. That really showed us the power of being community. Also here, we have the example of having refugee entrepreneurs and host community entrepreneurs. And you have some support mechanisms of government or other institutions, which is usually more accessible to the host community members. But through Life Project, we brought together host community and refugees, and together they applied, they informed each other about support mechanisms, and that built also resiliency for our refugee members. So there are lots of examples like this, and I think this is the key during that we understand. Also personally, I understand that being surrounded with people who care about you, people who are ready to support you, gives you so much power to overcome all the challenges that you face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really particularly like what you said, Guler, about for people who may not know, there's the host community in Turkey speaks a different language than the Syrian refugees. So one of the probably the biggest barrier to the refugee community being able to access services and has been language. And for entrepreneurs, as you said, for any support that the government might be offering, even if it's open to people who aren't Turkish nationals, they won't know that it's there unless someone is pointing it to them and maybe translating it for them. So it's really great to hear that that's happening within the Life Project as well. It's part of our social cohesion is also happening naturally.
It's not only gastro diplomacy dinners that we have for
Yes.
social cohesion, but like when times come, the crisis comes, like all the social events and social network that we built among our members and other community members, now it's time to support each other, and now bears the fruits actually.
Yeah, Thanks. I'd be interested, Noor, being in Mersin and being a member of the refugee community in Turkey, and also knowing the LIFE project very well, what are you seeing among the refugee community members, and sort of how this has impacted, how COVID has impacted the refugee community in Turkey overall?
So the impact of the pandemic on the refugees here and on our entrepreneurs is pretty much in line with the global impact over the food sector in general. And that is to say, restaurant owners, catering businesses have took the worst part of the fall. Such members are reporting they are barely making their monthly expenditures. On the other hand, some members who are basically doing finished frozen product, as Colin was saying, or organic food, they have actually reported some increase in their income. And when we analyze this, basically they are coming with the solid base of customers. And because people are very much, they don't want to buy from sources they are not familiar with during the pandemic, they created this word of mouth effect and basically brought more customers to these particular businesses.
And within, within Turkey and the food industry, you had mentioned that there's, and I think we've talked about this, there's not as much of a food delivery sort of, platform, I suppose, as there might be in the States. How is that affecting, folks who maybe were making things out of the home or had a shop? How are they having to pivot to get their products out? Are they just lowering production?
Well, this is a part of what we were trying to do with our members. We are basically emphasizing on digital marketing, on getting them access to these platforms. And as Güler was saying, okay, so they are closing their restaurants, but they can still access a platform where they would be able to sell and still get the business running.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
on that,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Güler.
I would like to add one point. Tomorrow we have a business pitch competition, and we already we are doing first online business pitch competition in Turkey. And there, for example, one of the finalists is a platform where they are trying to bring neighborhood-based delivery services for home cooks to the people in need. So this is one concrete example from our entrepreneurs who develop their products quickly after seeing that especially neighborhood-based demand for homemade food. So, and they are developing that platform. So like the entrepreneurs also, they are overcoming the challenges of the crisis, but they are also developing new businesses through the crisis, I would say.
And that touches on Karen's earlier emphasis on the role of technology in times like this. I think, we're illustrating that right now, being able to do this event. Normally, if we did an event in DC at 9 a.m., Nora and Güler wouldn't be able to join us. If they did, it would be remotely and it'd be hard to hear and all of that. So now it's really been a great equalizer. And likewise within the LIFE project, we've completely shifted everything online, all the support that we provide to the members, the incubation program. As Güler said, the business pitch competition is even 100% remote now. So I think also, we're demonstrating for the members that technology can be a solution and can provide a lot of opportunities, even in the food industry, when it's usually face-to-face. Yeah. Are you, what are you seeing, Noor, in terms of the supply chains and how this is impacting the supply chains, particularly for refugee entrepreneurs who may be getting products from Syria or from elsewhere?
Basically, entrepreneurs who are refugees or are migrants have been facing these difficulties coping with the new business environment as of day one. So starting from the process of hiring, getting working permits, imports, exports, they needed to learn everything and really establish themselves in here. So I think they have gained some sort of resiliency, and they have their sources. They are in touch with the local news where they would get some information. So they have been in a better position to cope with the changes. They have been affected with the pandemic because the supply chain entirely in the ecosystem was affected. But it's again very much in line with everything that's been happening here in Turkey.
Thanks. I know we could probably keep chatting about this for a couple of hours. There's so much to unpack here. I'm mindful of the time and want to make sure that we also are able to turn to some questions that have popped up in the chat. Maybe Johanna, you could help us sort of pull together everything that's been discussed and some final reflections that you have considering your role in the project and also your role in the cookbook.
So thank you, Marie, and thanks to everybody who's online. It's nice to see you this morning, even though we can't be there in person. And I just wanted to summarize some of the things that have been said by everybody, because I think the book in some ways is a great summary of a project that shows how social integration works. And I think what Claire mentioned is that not only does the book show social integration, it shows the entrepreneurship of many of these men and women who are featured there in the book. You have two communities, the Turkish community, as we mentioned, and the refugee community. And one of the things, particularly this pandemic has proven, is that you can converge not only on pages of a book, but in projects that take place on the ground. The other thing, and I will hold up the cookbook again for people to see because it is a beautiful publication and in demand despite the epidemic, so please order. It shows something unique, that this is a book not based on written recipes that were there before. This is a book of memories. And the people who were the co-editors together with me, Phyllis Hozagolo, and also Ala Alori, who's still with the CIPE project, have done an incredible job of translating memories into something very important. And they've translated them into written records of a journey, not only of the Turkish men and women, but of the Syrian men and women who can see this on the pages of a book. And the entire project, which was executed by a wide team of people, from the people at CIPE to the people at Life to the people at the MSA Cooking Academy in Istanbul, demonstrates that these pictures of food serve as a catalyst. Some of our people, and you should look at the CIPE website, are already doing videos about them. We have projects if you want to cook together, to talk to us about it. We'd love to post your videos. But I think what's interesting, and I will sum up things that Eric has said and that Colin has said, is that crises create possibilities. And that is what we're seeing right here. We have many examples of people who couldn't sell their bread, so they sold their starter. This is happening globally as well. People who didn't trust the confidence of yogurt making are now making yogurt in their home because their community trusts the safety and sanitary conditions because they were trained through a project. So it offers new opportunities. It's not always the best environment, but people who are creative are going to survive. And I just want to make a comment because Karen said something very interesting at the outset about the cloud technology. And Kimball Musk, who is the brother of Elon Musk, said something very interesting a few years ago. He said, you know, the internet in the 90s connected us globally and we felt very empowered. We could talk to our friends all over the world. This project and the cookbook shows what he says, that food is in fact the internet of the 21st century. It is connecting us, even though some of us are in Washington, some of us in Mersin, some of us in Istanbul. We are connected by this food, by what we eat, even what Colin said about the food of the Union Kitchen. So think about it. We have created in times of adversity a type of internet based on food and also based on social integration. And I do hope as you look at the website of the Life Project that you'll order this book, share it with your friends. I know I'm getting calls all the time. I wish I had more time to cook through it, but I know that we will do more because it's a wonderful publication that is a testimony to a project that has been highly successful. So I'm happy. I see there are lots of questions, Marie, and I know people are chomping at the bit to go on.
Thanks, Johanna. And I'll just add one small thing, which is that the book is available on Amazon. We are only able to ship directly from Amazon to US locations, but for those of you who may be outside the US and would like a book, just there's a email address that you can email in the Amazon description that you can reach out to us directly, and we can help you with that. So thank you, Johanna, for summarizing all of that. Also wanted to mention briefly that for those of you in DC, the cookbook is also available in the Union Kitchen stores. They have 6 grocery stores now? 4, okay, great. So you can also find the cookbooks there if you need to grab some groceries and want to grab a cookbook also. So I think Lucia from CIPE is helping us take questions from the audience. So Lucy, I'll turn over to you. I'm not sure the best way to do this.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I can see that a couple have already been answered in the chat, so we're going to go straight to the ones that haven't been answered. Let's see. Does the panel have any thoughts on added challenges that women-owned businesses have faced in these recent times? And do you have any thoughts on any added connection with the community at large as a result of COVID-19?
I'm happy to speak to that in regards to our community. Our entrepreneurs, the folks that we support, currently are over 50% women-owned businesses. The challenges that they faced are the same challenges that they faced prior to COVID-19. Like everyone, the challenges we face have been multiplied, they've been expanded, and they've become more intense. But they face the same challenges they faced before, but they are more dire. You know, the challenges of access to capital, the challenges of, generational and mentor-based support that they face, the challenges around networks as well. And so, yes, they're very real. Some of those things are becoming more real as we look at, how do we learn from each other? Does a community support itself? Is there capital and cash in that community? And can the business be successful? I think we found success during this period for all our businesses, and certainly for the female-owned businesses, in that they have a community, a ready-made one here, and we've been trying to pump as much money as possible into that to kind of decrease the need to have to go to like capital, investors who, aren't investing right now, whether they invest in men or women. They're not investing anything right now, so it's particularly challenging. So trying to remove the need to have to go to those places, frankly, outside of our ecosystem, outside of our supply chain.
Gulera or Noor, did you want to add to that in terms of how maybe our women members have been impacted or dealing with this?
Yeah, go ahead, Gulera. Okay.
Okay, so actually, as Colin said, all of us, we have been impacted, and women entrepreneurs, of course, they have been impacted like others, but I don't think that there's extra negative impact specific to women, but I believe there are some advantages with women's problem-solving skills, which are beneficial in those crisis times. Most of our entrepreneurs, like women entrepreneurs, they have business partners and they are used to work together as groups. I believe, as I mentioned during my talk before, being community and having support mechanisms supported us to overcome those challenges. And women's skills to work in a group and to support each other really was beneficial during those times. And I believe women entrepreneurs navigated their way better during those crisis times.
I can very shortly add to this as well. I think I understand the root of where the question is coming from. I've seen reports of gender-based violence increasing because of the frustration that the pandemic is putting on everyone. But just specifically for the Life project community, we have women that amazed us during the pandemic and basically provided the peer-to-peer learning that everyone in this community needs. So we have women entrepreneurs who reached new dealerships during this pandemic, and they pivoted very well and expanded the base of their customers. So I think when you have the determination, it doesn't really, everything is not about gender per se.
Thank you. Next question. In regards to businesses comprised within the supply chain, do you have any thoughts on how relationships have changed recently? Any pros and cons?
Maybe I can add with an example from more entrepreneurs here in Turkey. With this travel restrictions and also logistical challenges, most of the entrepreneurs see the value of having their products locally and having shorter supply chains in their local environment. And we have one example from our entrepreneur who was importing dates from Saudi Arabia for production of her goods. And now she faced challenges to import, and she started to look new ways for local producers, date producers here in Turkey, and she found one producer in south of Turkey and made deals with that producer and started to buy dates locally here in Turkey. So that was one concrete example where we shortened the lines of supply chain during this COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you. As a result of COVID-19, do you see any stronger alliances forming, either formally or informally?
I don't know if I would necessarily call it alliances, although I guess I kind of like that term, but I have noticed that because everything is just so exceptional, almost to the point of madness, it seems at times, there's this willingness to kind of check out all the rules or to do something unusual. So if one side of this normal business equation really is positioned very well and is very comfortable, and the other side is really hurting, I've seen situations where they'll just be like, well, look, we'll just run this on, zero. We'll give you what you need to keep going. And once you get going, when things open back up, you pay us back. And it's very informal. I've had, even my own manager has been able to work. I would just essentially barter. I mean, I talked to her. I was like, what did you do? How did you get that address? Oh, we just did this bartering. We just did this thing. We shook hands and whatever. So I think there is there's a real chance here to build some really powerful goodwill and social capital, and just sort of a storehouse of kind of that because there's business, which is the contract and the lawyers and right, and then there's this level of business that you can't always get to, where it's handshake, trust, much more power there. I think one of my best businesses is basically one that just runs on a handshake. There's actually no contracts involved, and either partner could blow the whole thing up at any time. So it's risky, but it means everybody tried to act nice because they don't want to blow it up, because there's no contract to fall back on. So that level of thing is also kind of, so I like, in a way, the idea that this provides an opportunity to kind of not throw out all the rules, but try some very, very different things. And I've seen some cool stuff that way. So yeah, maybe alliances is the right term. There's some, if you do it right, I think you could come out of this with some really strong associations.
Thank you. Can anyone provide some thoughts on businesses located in underserved communities?
I think I'll maybe ask a follow-up in terms of, I mean, underserved could be very broad in terms of how we're defining that. whether it be in the US or also as it relates to the Life Project in Turkey. I think certainly address the refugee community generally being largely underserved in a lot of ways, and especially and women as well. I don't know, Cullen, maybe you could answer that to, in terms of the US, what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I think to really relate it to the last question and the answer from Eric, I think we've started to see the importance of deep connections, alliances, and business in a localized community. The ability for, regional entrepreneurs to work together on a supply chain, the ability for local entrepreneurs to work on a supply chain, say to a city. And I think even more specifically, the ability of a neighborhood and the people within that neighborhood to work together to build a local supply chain has become so much more important. As we sit here in DC, we've seen how important it is to have a local supply chain that is uninterrupted. If you go to our stores, we have essentials, right? We've got things that people are making, and many times they're made locally, but certainly they're in our warehouse, and that's kind of the base of our supply chain. So, this isn't a super specific answer, but in general, the importance of a community and the ability of that community to support itself through using itself has been highlighted for me, and we see this in DC with the different groups of people in the different parts of the city that are working with the people nearby, because you're not traveling to other cities, you're not traveling even to other neighborhoods. In our stores, just as a data point, the average person that comes to our store is coming 3 times more often than they came before, because basically our stores are entirely just the people that live nearby, and they entirely come to our stores. And so just kind of highlighting that. And so as we look at like underserved communities and kind of how they're supporting each other, their ability to support each other, and then their, I guess, willingness to do so is paramount.
Thanks, Cullen. I think we have time for one last question, which came just now, which I think is a really good one to end the conversation on, is whether you all see the crisis as accelerating or making more permanent the trend to buy local, which I think we already were starting to see, but just as you said, Cullen, with supply chains and all of that, how are you all seeing that? Is that going to be a long-term shift, and is it happening faster because of it?
Well, I'll just jump off the last thing I was saying. I think this is an opportunity for local supply chains to establish themselves. I think the reason that we don't have local supply chains that are as large or as powerful as we'd like them to be, why there is a back to local movement, is because local supply chains failed in the past to be successful. And I think we have an opportunity now for local supply chains that might emanate from my community, that might emanate from the Life community, to establish themselves, to build resiliency, and to have something that will come out the other end of this crisis that will last, that will sustain. So I don't think it's a trend. I don't think it's inevitability. I think it's up to individuals within communities to establish things that will last. And so I'm certainly hoping that we accomplish that here in DC, and I'm hoping that communities across the country and in the world do the same thing. And would love to help and support where we can in Turkey, because I think that's so important to make these sorts of projects work.
And maybe to add on this, I believe this crisis also showed us the importance of local supply chains for food security. Mm-hmm. It's also part of food security, and we all face the challenge with existing system. We had the fear that we will not be able to buy the food that we needed, and that's why all the people stored all this food, and that brought the awareness that we need locally accessible food resources. That's why I believe in our new normal, local supply chains will be part of our life. and they will grow across Turkey and across the world, I believe, because it's so basic human survival thing, and we now become aware of it.
Any other final thoughts on that question on supply chains or anything else before we wrap up? We're just right on time, which I was not expecting, so that's great. Eric, Noor, anything else from you all?
I might add something in a very concise matter. We are all observing phase 2 of the pandemic thing. And we will always be supporting the entrepreneurs. And as Colin was saying, they need to understand that this is a new type of reality and cope with it.
Okay, great. Well, with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists, to Johanna, to Karen for opening us up. We are always welcome to, and excited to continue the discussion. So if you have further questions about this or about the LIFE project, please check us out on our website, on our social media, Twitter and Instagram. And we hope you stay well, both mentally and physically. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.